Hello Duelist, it's Tom, Box, and Happy New Year! And hope you guys had a wonderful holiday. And we're moving on from 2022 to 2023. Whether or not you stay with the format like every year, the next year usually kicks off by killing off previous year's decks and giving us a bunch of new decks to play with. And these are the decks that we're talking about today. These are the decks we have our eyes on, so that if you guys are going to be invested in this format or this year's worth of format, these are some of the decks that you can definitely take a look at. So these are going to be some of the best meta potential and rogue potential decks of 2023 based on the information we have so far. Just to clarify some of the definitions before you guys get angry with me putting your deck in the rogue category. Well, it's just a matter of potential of having impact on the format. I just have a lower expectation of them, but that doesn't mean that they won't be meta relevant. They could very much be the next best meta deck for all I know, but that's where the potential lies. Whereas meta potential, these are the ones where I have high meta expectation of these decks, where I do expect them to make major impact towards the meta game. That's it. Spilling over to 2023, we have Ishizu Tier, Sprites, Wanderees, and Bestial variants. These are probably going to get killed by ban list in terms of safety. Ishizu Tier is probably going to die the hardest. Wanderees probably die the second hardest. Sprites probably going to get another punch in the face. And I think Bestial variants are probably the ones that are the safest because they have more potential coming out. They have more products coming out for them. But let's move on to some new stuff now. Starting with meta potential, the decks that's already been on everyone's radar, Cashier. I've dropped over 100 hours on this deck already post-Photon Hypernova, and I've also bought 2 of the cores. That's how much I believe in this deck. In terms of their strengths, they have a solid base stat line, they are super consistent with even more searching capability and more summon from deck capability, and every single monster in their hand more or less can special summon themselves out, including the 3 new monsters, which kind of summon out as a quick effect. Yeah, surprise, surprise. And then they function really well under D-Shifter, because they rather have their cards banished and get their stuff triggered in the banish, rather than let you play with a graveyard. So have fun playing with the grave if you are a grave reliant deck. 5 zone locking is one thing that's really exclusive to them, because they can essentially do that on turn 1. If they know what deck you're playing, you might just get killed. And they have extra deck looking and ripping capability, and they have solid removal. So that's what makes this deck super strong, but that doesn't come without its weaknesses. I'm not just going to talk about the strength, I'm going to cover a little bit of the weaknesses just so we're not hopeless. There's a reason why this deck isn't tier 0. 1, there's a lack of protection. 2, there's a lack of interaction. Lack of protection, there's no negation that's being built, and a lot of these monsters don't have self-protecting abilities. Sure, they can rebuild their board, but they do suffer from destruction, as there's no repercussion when you remove their stuff. So having evenly matched, Sphere Mode, Raigeki, these are all solid ways to get rid of every single monster on the board. And in terms of lack of interaction, it's not that they don't have them, it's just that they're very, very slow. They're trigger-based interactions, so either you walked into it or they force you into it. But otherwise, there's only really just one monster that has an interaction, and that's a Rise Heart. That's the one that can target a card and banish it off of the field face down. The next big meta deck is another Cashier deck. It's Cashier Tearlament. This deck has already had some success in OCG. Some success, I mean, it dominated OCG for a very long time, and so it's probably going to happen over here as well. And the reason why is because after you lose all the Ishizu stuff, you're naturally going to pivot into something that's consistent, and this is it, because you get a Cashier Tearlament. I think that's the name of the monster, which essentially is a Havness that doesn't require your opponent to activate effect to summon itself out. Upon summoning, you get to mill 3 of your own cards or mill 3 of your opponent's card, and if this card is sent to the graveyard, I think either by card effect or something like that, you get to mill 2 more cards from your deck. So in other words, you can potentially mill 5 cards with this. And because it carries the Cashier name, you get to search this out with Fenrir, turning Fenrir not only into a removal, but you can also use it as an extender searcher. And you can get the Fenrir with the new field spell, so you kind of see how so many cards can just be shoved in, keeping the whole deck just as consistent as before. We already know how strong the Tearlament deck is in terms of, the output of damage and control and removal. So this is just going to keep that deck up there in the top tier. Moving down further into the future, we have Cyberstorm Axis, and they were getting a lot of retrains and, new support for older archetypes. And the archetype that, got my attention, that really piqued my interest, has got to be Super Heavy Samurai. I never thought that I was going to ever say this, because for an old deck that was not even rogue to finally break the meta barrier, that's a huge step in the right direction. Now, I'm only saying that this is a meta contender mainly because it has 1-card combos. The new support, they have their own Rhoda in the form of a monster that's also a tuner that can modify its own level, that can be special summoned back from the graveyard because it's a level 2, so you can use Sprite Elf, you can use basically their own, I guess their own graveyard reviver as well. So they have lots of options there, but the one card combo that makes it insane is because Soul Piercer, the old school Surge card, that card is not once per turn, and you're going to be abusing that card 5 to 10 times a turn to rebuild your entire hand and just constantly cycle the card over and over. And that's what makes this deck incredibly powerful, and the boards that it can build essentially reminiscent of the old Eternal format Dragon boards. It's like that. But just like that, you know, one of the good things about it is that there's no Mystic Mine, because Mystic Mine, you know, just killed the entire deck. In this case, it's even worse because there's definitely no spells and traps, and it's very unlikely that this deck can side spells and traps because of the nature of the deck. You cannot play spells and traps in the deck, or else if you have a spell or trap in the graveyard, you kind of can't play your deck because you shut down all of your own effects. So that's why this is a very strong deck, especially when going first. But when it comes to going second, it's definitely a lot weaker. You're probably going to see Sphere Modes and Kaijus as one of their key forms of removal. And yeah, that's probably what you're going to be expecting. But this deck's still very strong. The board's infinite negates and like FTKs. Yeah, pretty nasty stuff. And the last deck within the meta potential I'm going to talk about is going to be Mana Dome. This is the last part of the Visa Starfrost storyline, where now we're talking about synchros, and Visa Starfrost, naturally being a tuner, obviously is going to be playing its best within this particular deck. And so the Mana Dome cards, they are tuners, they're earth tuners, and whenever they're destroyed, you just summon more of them from the deck. And it's not even once per turn, so you can constantly just generate more and more orbs, and you're not really limited to just synchro. You can go into links as well. You can play with Visa Starfrost, and you can climb into, say, one of your favorite monsters in Scareclaw, Lightheart going to the field spell giving you Wrecked Heart, and you can use that to generate additional non-tuner bodies. Or if you want to change up your playstyle, maybe go into some Xyz, go into some links, you can link climb with this deck. So it's like a synchro deck that's a little bit more diverse overall, and the end boards is what really justifies me in saying that this is a meta potential deck, because yes, we're seeing those big synchro monsters, but we're also seeing some crazy Xyz monsters. You're seeing, again, Eternal format end boards, which essentially just shuts people completely down if you do build everything correctly. There is the risk of getting hit by Nibiru, I'm not gonna lie, because if you want to build your board, the deck is based off of destruction when it comes to triggering their effects. So if you hit the little mana orbs with the destruction based effects, and a lot of the cards like Rumheart destroys a card, and some of the spell cards also destroy cards, that's how you're generating these free advantages. So if you do get hit by Nib, tributing everything off, it does hurt, but we're going to have to see at the end how the ban list is going to adjust it so that these decks are going to be more playable. But they're already playable as they are, but it's just going to be more viable if, you know, Ishizu tier isn't in the format. You know what I'm saying? Now for rogue deck potential, I'm not going to go into too much detail for them, because if I start going into too much detail, their surprise factor is going to be gone. But number one from the Amazing Defenders is going to be MCconk. I wouldn't say MCconk was really strong right at the get-go, right out of the gate. I would say they're best right after they get their support from Cyberstorm Access, when they have the better equipped spells. But this is the deck that's probably going to feel more like Lyrolust meets Grand Maju, because this is a deck that throws Kaijus at your opponent and basically OTKs you in a very short form. So if you're not prepared for MCconk's reflection damage type, I guess, playstyle, then you're going to be caught off guard, because it's not really combo heavy. It's just going to drop a couple of cards and go for attack, very similar to Grand Maju. The second rogue deck is a deck that's already technically rogue. That's going to be Plunder Patrols. In Photon Hypernova, they get a new card, which is their Earth ship. This is their grounded ship, which is mainly as like a resource control card. Rather than just like generating like negations against certain stuff, this one is based off of when your opponent special summons. Well, guess what? You get to summon out another Plunder Patrol from the deck, which is huge because that can lead into many other different plays. It just branches out really nicely. And on top of that, it can also retrieve some graveyard resources and put itself onto the pendulum scale. And when it's on the pendulum scale, I can tell you it just generates any attribute monsters onto the field as a token on both sides. And what makes that important is that Plunder Patrol, they play based off of whatever attribute that's on the field or in the graveyard. That's huge for them, because that can help them jumpstart into different ships out of the extra deck. So that's where they're going to be coming from, and the deck is already really strong if you know how to play it. So this deck, definitely something to look forward to in Photon Hypernova. The third deck with rogue potential is Generators post Photon Hypernova. Yes, they get two cards. They get Vera, and they also get Levitine, and I would say that Levitine, the new Xyz boss monster, is incredible, especially if you know how to play with the deck and you can generate a lot of materials under it. It's essentially a board wipe. Back when Mystic Mine was still available, people were playtesting with this card. it can out Mystic Mine. It is a Mystic Mine because it can absorb the Mystic Mine and use it as material for the Jormungandr. Basically, when you summon out this card, you get to make everything on the field. Of course, they lose 1,000 attack and defense. That's cool, but you tribute this Xyz summon card to summon out basically Jormungandr. You summon out another Xyz generator monster that isn't a fairy. This is a fairy, by the way. And you get to attach that many materials based off of the amount of materials that was on the card. So you can hit the graveyard or on the field and you just absorb it, which makes it a very, very potent, non-targeting, non-destructive removal that doesn't even put stuff away. So yeah, that's the really good part about this card. And they also get Vera, which allows them to summon more stuff from the graveyard. So just more potential in general for this deck. And the last rogue potential deck, I have to say, something that I've tried for many, many hours, that's got to be the Tellarknight Constellar deck, or Constellar Tellarknight deck. It's very powerful. I've tried the pure Tellarknight version. That deck is super mid. Don't try it. It's not worth your time. You can't play it like old school Duelist Alliance. People will flame you for it. And it's kind of meh. And yeah, the end board is really, really breakable still, unless you get really sacky with like all the counter traps. But when it comes to the better version, which is Constellar Tellarknight, a combo based deck that ends up building a couple of monsters, that deck is still very strong. It generates a ton of free pluses, good recovery, and good, follow up the turn after. However, it suffers from several key weaknesses. One, Droll Lockbird probably would be in the format, so yeah, that one will kill your combo just straight up. The second one is Nibiru. There's nothing you can do about it. You don't have any sort of anti-light based play unless you can somehow set up an Appaloosa early. But this is not that deck. You can't set up a quick Appaloosa. And the third thing is going to be the Bestials and just DD Crows. Hitting you at the Delteros point of your combo when you're trying to Alta Air revive Delteros, when you're doing, say, like a Isolde play. That part hurts a lot, because you're losing about 2 to 3 monsters on that play. In other words, your end board is much weaker. Sure, you might have 1 or 2 interactions, but you could get wiped by 1 card. You can trade 1 card for the entire board, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And those are some really just weaknesses that just stands out pretty badly. Unfortunately, that's just something you're going to have to live with, because there's not much to counter when it comes to those cards. But that being said, I still think the deck has a lot of potential, especially if you're going to be coming back into the game. This is a solid deck to come back to. I wouldn't say it's like the best of the best deck or anything like that, but I would say that you're definitely going to have a lot of fun playing this deck, and you will be able to compete to a certain level. That's all I got for the rogue potential. If you guys think there's other decks of rogue potential or meta potential, or maybe something there's a higher point on the list, or something but there's a lower point on the list, leave it down in the comment section. I thank you guys for watching this video. Hopefully 2023 is going to be much better. Not as many tier 0 formats, or no tier 0 formats, and maybe there's a good diversity. Looking at how OCG handled their ban list, that gives me a little bit of hope that hopefully maybe TCG will do something similar and we get that diversity. I know some people don't like it, but I think more people at locals, the better. That's all I got for this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.